Hi, Theodora. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. Sorry for the delay. As I was explaining, I had to move the studio back into the office because our neighbours started some major construction work this morning, and like someone was drilling into my head. So we packed everything into the car, came to the Dezeen office. So I'm back in the office for the first time in like almost 3 months. It's weird.
Yeah, I can imagine. How does it feel?
Um, um, well, strange actually. Strange. I mean, I think I'm the only person in the entire building, but it's very hot here in London, so I'm quite grateful of the air conditioning.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, so on the news, it's meant to be 29, isn't it? In the next few days.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Anyway, welcome to Screen Time, our
thank
BDF daily interview series sponsored by Philips TV and Sound. And tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your name? What do you do? Where are you?
you. So my name is Theodora Alfredsdottir, and I'm an Icelandic product designer. I'm in Iceland at the moment, but I'm normally based in London. So I've been living in London for the last 8 years now. So I moved there. I did my undergrads here in Iceland. Then I moved to do my MA at the Royal College of Art. Then I went on and worked for Philip Malawan for a year and a half, and then for Bath and Laura Wood, which was both I learned so much from both of them. And then I decided to focus on my own practice. So I work very much on process-driven projects and teach as well.
And how come you're in Iceland then? Did you go back when the lockdown started?
No, so I was actually quite lucky. So I have been here more or less since January because I was teaching for a full semester. But I decided when this lockdown happened, so we did like our own version of lockdown here in Iceland. And then I decided to move to the countryside. So it did make a little shift myself to kind of try and make the most of this opportunity to not having to be anywhere specific for work. So that's been quite a change to be in the countryside.
So where are you? In the middle of nowhere, next to a geyser, or what?
No, it's pretty. So my grandparents used to live here, so it's only 30 minutes drive from the city. So it is quite easy to get back if I need to. But there's just like a huge mountain on one side and the sea on the other. So it's it is quite isolated, which is very different, obviously, from the hustle and bustle in London. So yeah.
Are you going to be able to show us the landscape later?
No, because I decided to get my friend's apartment borrowed for this interview, as the internet in the countryside is quite sketchy.
Ah, okay. On a cliff top. Okay, but how is the situation in Iceland? Because Iceland's done very well in locking down coronavirus, I think. You're almost clear now, aren't you?
Yeah. It's actually, it's kind of back to normal, really. We managed to handle the situation, I think, pretty well from the beginning. I think a part of it was that it was quite science-led rather than, led by economy or anything else. And we implemented a lockdown fairly quickly. And I think, people just kind of responded really quickly to everything. But there are obviously other things at play as well, such as we are a small nation. We're only 360,000. So it is easier to self-isolate when you have a huge country. And we don't really rely on public transport, which is another thing. And the weather here isn't great. So people are not, prone to go to the parks and hang out there. So there are a few things. But yeah, so we are kind of in the clear now, pretty much.
And do you have any plans to come back to London, or is London too much of a mess for you to even consider that?
Well, the plan was to come back just literally today, but because the semester is over that I was teaching, but I decided to delay it for a month at least. So I'm going to see. I mean, things are going to clear up in London pretty soon. So I'll be back then.
Well, that's good that you're optimistic about it. And before you give us your presentation, tell us a little bit about the top you're wearing.
So this is a top. Camilla Valala did this collaboration with Gorman, which is like a New Zealand brand. And it's just one of my favorites.
Did you see the talk we did with Adam Nathaniel Furman last week when he was talking about his New London Fabulous movement, and exactly. was one of the designers that he felt was part of that?
Yeah, definitely.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you can just see, I think what is really, really interesting about her is also that she seems to have blossomed a little bit later than a lot of other people, which I think it's always really nice when you hear these stories as well, because then, I mean, she's huge now and she's doing amazing things. So, and you can kind of just see her everywhere. So yeah, she's definitely a big part of that movement.
And then of course you work with Beth and Laura Wood, who is pretty colourful.
Yes, yes.
So tell us what you were doing when you were working with her. What was that like?
That was great. So I was doing, so she has a fairly small, like she's working on huge projects, but has a fairly small studio. So it was only me and an intern there at the time. So I was doing a little bit of like studio managing and then also just working on different projects with her and kind of, following up on other projects. So there's always this time of like getting into whatever she has been doing, but it's fantastic. She is such a colorful personality as well, just to work with. So, all the little things around in the studio, you could just really, blown away.
So anyway, let's see a bit about your work. Do you want to
Yes.
presentation, if you could share your screen?
Yeah. So I'm going to be telling you about 4 of my projects. So are you all right seeing this now? So 4 projects that all have very different starting points. The first one is one of my graduation projects from the RCA. And it kind of started on a trip to the Lake District. So this was at a time where we were supposed to be coming up with an idea for our graduation project. And it was obviously quite stressful because this was the moment to find the best idea. And me and my friend that was studying with me, we both got fairly stressed out and we just really wanted to get out of London and get some fresh air. So we decided to go to the Lake District. And we were both really just waiting for this epiphany. We both thought that we would just have like inspiration would strike us and we would know what to do. But unfortunately, that's not normally how things happen. So we just enjoyed our time there. We were there for a few days. We walked around, went on hikes. And during those hikes, I kind of started collecting stones. And I think this is a very common hobby. But then when we finally got back to London, I realized that really the only thing that I brought back was a bag of rocks. So I, started thinking about like here in Iceland, we don't have a lot of greenery or vegetation, and a lot of our landscape just consists of rocks and black sands, and it's quite rough in that sense. So what it has this compelling power. Like we have all these stories, and we believe that elves live in some of the stones, and so on. So I started thinking like, where is this nature within our domestic environment? So I then took my bag of rocks down to Imperial College, and to make long story short, I spoke to a lot of specialists and found out that all these rocks contain the mineral feldspar, which is actually a family of minerals that make up 60% of the Earth's crust. And this mineral is essential for a lot of industries as well. So it's used, for example, in glass making, where it lowers the melting point. In ceramics, it's a part of the clay body, and it's also used as glaze. So it is, you can find it, you can coat paper with it, you can use it in rubber to give strength. So it is kind of everywhere. So I thought this was quite fascinating. So I wanted to try and, get this story across. So I started looking into storytelling devices and decided to make this totem. So you can kind of like read the objects down to their origin, the stone itself. So all the materials contain feldspar in one way or another. And the reason for this being a dining set is both because obviously a lot of the materials were just really suitable for it, but it also addresses the fact that we are becoming more and more aware of where our food is coming from and what we eat and all that. But we're still so far removed from our material culture. So I think that, knowing what you're eating your organic tomato of is equally as fascinating as that story of like where the food is coming from. So I then, hang on. So this is one of the bowls there. So it's a big serving bowl, and I decided to try and use the materials or the qualities of the materials in the best way possible. So this bowl is made from Parian porcelain, which has a really high feldspar content, which makes it almost self-glazing. So it kind of closes itself really well. And the thing is that it's really difficult to make a big piece like that from this porcelain. So it has a tendency to warp, but instead of thinking of that as a negative thing, I decided to have it press molded. So you have like a big plaster mold and then you press the clay into it, which creates these seams in it, and you can see like the imprints of the fingers and so on. So even if it were to warp when it was being fired, that would just add to the overall aesthetic. So I quite like, this kind of thinking. The next project is also a ceramic project, really. So this is a collaboration I did with my friend Daniel Durnin. So we studied together at the RCA, and we had decided we wanted to collaborate on something, and he had just found this layer of clay up on a plot of land where his parents live up in Oxfordshire, and we wanted to do something with the clay, but we didn't really know what. And at the same time, I got invited to take part in this exhibition at a museum here in Iceland called Clay Experiments and More, I think it was called. And the brief was really open. We basically just had to make anything that included clay, and the final object could be as final as we wanted it to be. So this was perfect for us to just experiment and see what we could come up with. So we started doing some tests and kind of like trying to figure out what it was that we wanted to do. And we realized that normally all ceramic work is quite intentional in a way, like it's highly functional and you have to put a lot of yourself into it. So when you make something, you either build it by hand or you cast it into molds, but the shape is very intentional. You've kind of like the aesthetics are come from the craftsman. And it's a very lengthy process because you have to, you shape the object, you have it dry, you fire it in a kiln, and then you take it out and you might glaze it and fire it again. So it's like a really long period of time. So we wanted to both try and remove ourselves from the process as much as possible and speed the process up. So we ended up using this gas burner. So what we did in the end, after doing some tests, we kind of created this cookie cutter thing. So we would drill out a core from the ground, and then we would use this gas burner and just literally fire into it for a certain amount of time, which would then start to cook the clay or fire it from the inside out. So we would then be able to just carve out the soil or the clay that didn't turn into ceramics and kind of just lift up this vase. So it was kind of like this archaeological excavation because we didn't really know what we were going to get. So we kind of co-designed it with the material as we would choose or kind of design the inside of it. And then the soil around it would kind of create all these little imperfections, if you can say so. So we did a series of 7, which we exhibited at this museum. And then that collection was bought by Thomas Eik and is now a part of his permanent collection in Amsterdam. And then we were meant to be doing series 2 for Milan Design Week and showing that at Rosanna Orlandis, but that got postponed. So now we've decided to use the summer to try and kind of scale this up a little bit more and push it even further. And the third project is this one here. So this is something that I've been working on for the last couple of years. And it's kind of like an ongoing research, if you can say so. So it's in a few different parts and it centers up on molds and mold making. So mold making is essential for a lot of manufacturing processes. And kind of what sparked it was that I was moving from a studio to another studio. And I realized that I had a box full of molds that I knew that I was never going to use again. But somehow I didn't want to throw them away. So I started thinking like, and I think a lot of people can identify with this because there's a lot of effort that goes into making molds. You know, there's time, there's money, there's like, the better the mold, the better the object is going to be. So, you know, you take your time with it. But then once you've cast all the objects that you want, the focus shifts from the mold over to the object, and the mold is just put to one side. So I was thinking if there would be a way of actually extending the active life of the mold. So once it had served its purpose as a mold, if it could turn into something else. So this is the first part in it, which is literally like a physical illustration of the concept. So the white piece is the desired object and the colorful one next to it is the mold. So once I had gotten enough objects out of it, I painted the mold the way that you would have taken it apart. So it's still kind of informative, but then glued it together. So it just becomes this ambiguous piece on its own. And then the object itself maybe becomes a little bit secondary because the mold is so colorful and kind of interesting. And then you've got this object that is a little bit just more subtle in a way. I then carried on, and at this point I was also looking a little bit into how you can make mass manufacturing a little bit more unique, and if that were to add value to objects. So I created this mold, which you can see in the top left corner, which you can stack up differently. So the illustration shows these three shapes. It's a rectangle, a triangle, and a square that you can then stack up differently and cast into it, but always getting unique objects. So by using very subtle interventions into a standardized process, you can create unique objects. So I then scaled that up and made these tabletops, and the mold became frame for a mirror. So they are both functional, but they kind of like, they live their own separate lives after this. This then led me on to these plaster molds, where you can stack them up any way you like, and you can flip them around to create these ceramic side tables. So again, looking into, can uniqueness or individualism within standardized batch production add value to it? And I think this is, and I feel like each time I do a new version of these, because it's been like 3 little studies now, I guess, I feel like I kind of see another angle that I want to explore. So now I'm working on a glassware collection for a Dutch company, which is kind of like looking at this, but from a slightly different angle as well. And then the last project that I'm going to tell you about is a light collection. This is a collaboration as well that I do with my friend Tino Subert. So we studied together at the RCA, and then we've been sharing a studio. So throughout that, we've never worked together before, but we do kind of like talk about our projects, and we serve as like critical feedback to one another. And this kind of came up in one of those chats, and we decided to try and do a collaboration. So it is a collection of lights that is kind of like a contrast between industry and then craftsmanship. So we wanted it to be a fairly simple concept where all the pieces are functional. So the aesthetics are they come from the function of the object. The tubes are just off the shelf, kind of aluminum tubes, and then the craftsmanship comes in the veneer forming. But this is inspired by mid-century furniture making. So, and we've been kind of playing around with possibilities. So you can have it as a single sconce, like a wall sconce, and then you can add these wall panels. So you can create a landscape really in any space you like. And then there's a linear light that goes with it. And we launched this at the London Design Festival 2019. And now we're going to be taking part in Design March, which was meant to be in March. That's the Icelandic Design Week, but it had to be postponed, and it's going to happen now end of June. So there we're going to be launching new colors and new combinations. So this is, something that we've been working on now. Maybe just to finish this off is that all these projects are kind of, my personal projects, but I do also work with companies where the briefs are maybe a little bit stricter. So for example, I'm working now with both the glassware with the Dutch company, and then an Icelandic company. I'm doing another light collection. So then that's, a little bit more straightforward maybe. And that's something that I really enjoy as well. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
Thank you. And if you could just unshare.
Yeah.
Oh, my question, because my first question was going to be, and these projects, are they self-initiated projects, or do you have a client? Are they going to be going into production? You sort of half answered that, but with all of those projects, are you doing anything with them? Are they still living on? Yeah,
they are all still living on. And I think what is really nice about them as well is I feel like sometimes if you give your projects a little breathing space, you start seeing new opportunities in them. So I think that's what's happening as well. But these are, like yourself say, all kind of like personal projects that I have started either through some briefs or something like that, or just because I've gotten some funding somewhere that have kind of like enabled me to do research and carry on with them. But then like the lights, that's something that we are producing. The ceramic, that's something that we are, we kind of like, we made them and then we looked for a client to buy them. So it is kind of the reverse of the normal way of product design, I guess.
It's interesting actually, because since we've been doing these daily talks, a few architects have said that this is now a really good time during this pandemic time to do speculative architectural projects. It's more normal for designers to do speculative work because it's kind of easier. You can make a vase on your own. You don't need to have engineers and things like that. But how about you? Is your studio a business, or are you still getting to that stage, or are you still throwing up these kind of speculative projects and waiting for a collector to buy or a manufacturer to get in touch with you?
No, it is definitely a business. So I think when I left at Bethan's, I decided to kind of focus on that completely. So for the last couple of years, that has been my business. And then I teach as well. So that's kind of goes alongside it. But I do still find time to do, we have a pretty good grant system here in Iceland, which has been great. So that's something that has enabled me to do some of these projects as well. So then you can kind of allow yourself to just indulge in whatever takes your fancy in a way, and then try and find a client afterwards. But then, like I say, I do these collaborations or like more work that is just paid concrete money right away type of thing.
So what kind of projects, that's different work from the work you've shown then, is it, the paid work?
Yes, because I feel like this, yeah, because these, I feel like these are my very, this is where my heart is basically.
So what are the projects, the paid projects you haven't shown us then? Are you designing washing machines and vacuum cleaners, or?
No. That's more like I say, if it is like a stricter brief where, for example, this one that I'm working on now is like to make a table lamp. So that's something that I then, of course, I kind of, I use my aesthetics and all that, but it has to fit in with the ethos of the company and so on. So that is a different way of approaching it, especially when you know what the end result is meant to be. There is just a different way, because I feel like in these projects, what is so interesting and free about them is that you start with a starting point and there isn't a defined end result. You can kind of like allow yourself to just search for, kind of have the project define itself in a way.
And you mentioned Design March, the Reykjavik annual design fair. Didn't happen in March, obviously, but is happening in June. So that's this month. Is it actually going to go ahead?
Yes, it is. So it's happening. It's from the 24th to the 28th. And yeah, so they announced right away that they were just going to move it till the end of June. But I think for the last couple of months, they have been kind of just like monitoring the situation, seeing if it was actually, if it could happen really. But they've decided that it's going to go ahead, but with a slightly different format than normally. So we normally have like big events such as design talks and opening parties and things like this, which are not going to happen. So it's just more going to be, the focus is going to be on the exhibitions themselves, and that's about it. So it is a slightly different format. And I think, initially I wasn't really sure if this was going to be the best way for us to take part in it. But then, because design weeks are often about like you're meeting friends, you're meeting people, you're kind of like, looking for clients and all this. It's a very social thing. And then when that whole thing is kind of removed, it becomes something different. But I think also at times like this is very important to just, stick together. You have to kind of like, you are a part of this community. So everyone needs to kind of pull their weight in that as well. And a different platform just offers different opportunities. So it's just a matter of trying to find the ways you can use it to your advantages.
So maybe that's going to be the first design week to take place since the lockdown started. I think there are some events scheduled for China later this month, but definitely it sounds like the first.
Yeah, I think so. Which is hopefully just a good thing.
How you said you were planning to show in Milan as well, and obviously that's been postponed now until next year. How difficult is it for young designers to carry on running their studios if there's no physical places to show?
It obviously does impact it quite a lot, because this is something, these design weeks, they do help a lot because you get hopefully some exposure and you meet people and all that, like I said. But Then I think also if you're trying to look at the silver linings, like for instance with that project, now Daniel and I just have more time to develop it. So hopefully we can just have like a bigger show next year. But it is, yeah, it has its downsides as well, of course.
And a lot of people, of course, because of coronavirus, are beginning to think, well, actually, you know what, flying around the world, staying in hotels, paying for taxis and restaurants and things like that is actually a very inefficient way of getting through life, as well as being environmentally damaging. But for you, showing in Milan, does it have real benefits? Does it pay off for you, or is it just a big party and you get to meet lots of people?
No, it does definitely pay off. But I think regardless of if you're showing or not, you can use it in a very, I think it's kind of the attitude that you bring with you. In a way, you can obviously, it could just be a big party and you meet a lot of people, and you meet people that you studied with and maybe you haven't seen for years and so on. But then, of course, this is the perfect place to try and set up meetings and, get in touch with people that you've wanted, because this is kind of the hub. You have, there's so many people there at the same time. But of course, like you say, this whole thing might change because, like you said, people might not be flying, and kind of, I think we're all going to take a little step back now and reevaluate what we want to do and what is actually, what we need really. But I somehow think that these design weeks are still going to be a big part of it, because it is just a very different thing to see. Because I've been teaching now product design through a screen like this, and it's worked, it's fine. But at the same time, it is difficult to talk about, texture and details and things like this when you are showing something on a screen or you're showing an image or whatever it is. So I think we're always, we're just tactile people, I guess. So we want to be close to the things that you're, looking at.
And Design March, or Design June as it now is,
Yeah.
International visitors, or is it going to be a much more smaller and local affair, do you think?
I think it's going to be a local affair, yeah. I don't really know. I think they are still debating, because now when people enter the country, they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. But they were debating to maybe have that stop on the 15th of June. So I don't know, like if that were to happen, then maybe some international guests would come. But then again, I don't really feel like anyone is thinking about traveling right now.
It's not the thing I particularly want to do.
No, exactly. No. So I think, they are looking looking into opportunities such as, is there a way of doing some podcasts, or is there some can you somehow stream some of this, or, so just creating a new platform online.
Well, they should get in touch with us. We could collaborate with
Exactly.
Virtual Design Festival.
Yeah, that would be great.
Have a word with them. We were planning on working with them in March, but obviously weren't able to.
Yeah.
By the way, we have something in common, which is that, when you were at the Royal College of Art and you did your final project after a trip to the Lake District, I did exactly the same thing when I was doing my design degree.
Really?
My father had just moved to the Lake District, and I went up there for the first time to stay with him. And when I was starting to think about my final project, and I based my final project on the cattle troughs in the farms there, the stone ones. Some of the farms have these really ancient stone troughs where the cows and the sheep go to drink from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think this, for us going to the Lake District, this was really, so basically what happened is that we had no idea where we were going. So we had a tutor, Max Lamp was teaching us at the time, and he was very fond of Iceland. He had just done a project here, and he was like, okay, girls, I think you need to go and see nature. And he was like, the closest thing you can get to Icelandic nature is up at the Lake District. And we were like, yep, sounds good. So we literally booked accommodation and the train for the morning after. And then we got this Airbnb, and we had we didn't know anything about the Lake District. And then we got there and we were staying at this old couple's house, and the guy was like, oh, I can drive you and drop you off somewhere tomorrow morning. So we met him at the car after breakfast. And then he was like, okay, so where do you girls want to go? We were like, to the lake. And he was like, oh dear. He was like, okay. So, but it was definitely what we just needed. And it's quite nice as well when I don't know, because we were so actively seeking inspiration, which never works. but then how it kind of, it comes from something that's so just like this, just picking rocks. It's something that I just do without thinking about it, and then it turns into something.
So you just went back to London with a bag of rocks.
Yeah, and some mint cake, Kendal mint cake, so good.
But I don't like Kendal mint cake, but did you try the ginger and Grasmere?
No.
Next time.
No.
Because Kendal mint cake is just sugar and water and mint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next time, Grasmere gingerbread is my tip.
Thank you.
But it's been great to talk to you. Sorry we had to cut it a bit short due to the late start.
That's all right, no worries.
Enjoy Design Week. Congratulations on Iceland for having what looks like it's going to be the first Design Week for about 3 or 4 months. And I'm sorry no one from Dezeen is probably going to be there, but next time we'll see you there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And next time we talk, I want to see the landscape as well.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Done, yeah.
Thank you so much.
See you. Bye.